This was one of the most horrifying cuts ever witnessed in the history of professional boxing. The stage was set for an interim championship clash, and in that ring stood two very different men, each with his own story, his own scars, and his own ambitions. On one side was Badou Jack, the veteran. Born in Sweden to a Gambian father and a Swedish mother, Jack had built his reputation through years of grit, discipline, and consistency. He had shared the ring with legends, carried himself as a consummate professional, and earned a reputation as one of the toughest and most resilient fighters of his era. Jack was not a flashy showman. He was a worker, a grinder, a man who broke opponents down slowly with persistence and determination. Across from him stood Marcus Browne, the younger, sharper contender. A southpaw with crisp technique and a swagger to match, Browne had climbed through the ranks with his speed, precision, and ruthless efficiency. He wasn't just fighting for a title that night, he was fighting for validation, to prove that he belonged among the elite. His confidence was unshakable, his punches sharp and calculated. Where Jack brought experience, Browne brought youth and ambition. From the opening rounds, the fight moved at a slow, almost grinding pace. It wasn't beautiful boxing. It was messy, full of clinches, elbows brushing close, shoulders pushing, constant physical wrestling for position. Browne held the edge. His punches landed cleaner, sharper, more accurate. Every time Jack pressed forward, determined to close the distance, he was met with a stinging counter shot that halted his momentum. Still, Jack would not be denied. Round after round, he pushed forward, his eyes locked on Browne, searching for that one opening to shift the tide. Then came the moment that changed everything. Midway through the fight, in one of those many rough clinches, disaster struck. Their heads clashed with a sickening thud. When Jack pulled away, the horror was immediate. A deep, grotesque gash had ripped open across the center of his forehead, and blood poured out in torrents. Within seconds, his face was covered, crimson streaming down into his eyes, dripping off his chin, soaking into his gloves. The crowd gasped, some turning their heads away. Commentators fell silent for a split second, stunned by the brutality of what they were witnessing. For most fighters, that would have been the end. A cut that severe, bleeding so heavily, is a nightmare scenario. Vision is lost, breathing becomes harder, and every punch magnifies the pain. But Badou Jack is not most fighters. He refused to quit. He blinked through the blood, wiped it away when he could, and pressed on. Every step forward was a statement, every jab a declaration that he would not bow to circumstances. Browne, sensing the vulnerability, sharpened his assault. His left hand snapped out again and again, targeting the wounded warrior in front of him. Every shot reopened the cut, every connection spraying more blood across the canvas. But no matter how brutal it became, Jack stood tall, taking the punishment, firing back whenever he could. The fight was no longer about tactics, no longer about scorecards. It had become a test of will, a battle of endurance against agony itself. When the final bell rang, the crowd rose to its feet. Jack, drenched in his own blood, stood unbowed. He heard that final gong on his feet, refusing to give in, standing tall until the very last second.